This past Tuesday, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren responded publicly to a request by Fox News to have a town hall on their network. A lengthy tweet thread from the former Harvard professor expressed her disdain for the network, and it all started like this. Warren tweets, "I love town halls. I've done more than 70 since January, and I'm glad to have a television audience be part of them. Fox News has invited me to do a town hall, but I'm turning them down. Here's why. Fox News is a hate-for-profit racket that gives a megaphone to racists and conspiracists. It's designed to turn us against each other, risking life and death consequences to provide cover for the corruption that's rotting our government and hollowing out the middle class." Now, I'm actually going to link Warren's Twitter account in the description below this video, so I encourage you to scroll back through all of the other campaign promises she's putting out and read the thread for yourself, because I found a great deal of irony in the level of hatred that's just in that tweet thread alone, as she is calling out the network that has invited her for the hatred. But in case that irony wasn't enough, while I started looking for reporting on the event of Elizabeth Warren turning this invitation down, I immediately found this article from Vanity Fair. The article reports on the fact that Warren turned down Fox News for the town hall, and this article by Bess Levine starts out with a headline, "Elizabeth Warren tells Fox News to go and fuck itself." Now, a lot of people would think that this is just a headline to grab attention, but we can look down into the article and read the first paragraph and realize that this is not just an attention grabber. The first paragraph reads, "There are some who believe that in order to win enough votes to send Donald Trump back to the hellhole where he belongs, Democrats must appeal to members of the president's base on their terms, in an environment where they feel safe and don't have to worry a socialist will show up and steal all their money, or the gay task force will make them bake a cake for a lesbian wedding. In other words, they think that the Democratic candidates for president must appear on Fox News. Elizabeth Warren is not one of those people." It's such an inclusive article, and it will be linked in the description, as well as Warren's Twitter account, so I encourage you again to go and read this article for yourself. Now, I have made my views on Fox News very clear, and I haven't been shy about them at all. Fox News is not a right-wing outlet. I don't care how many people on the left try to demonize it as such. When you have Tucker Carlson going on Ben Shapiro's show and advocating for a big government takeover to make sure that industries don't get lost to automation, that is not a conservative idea. The news is fairly right-leaning to center, but this is not a mainstream right-wing network. If you want real right-wing content, you have to turn to the internet for it. But that aside, we are going to assume that Elizabeth Warren is right and Fox News is a right-wing network. So let's talk about the Democrat candidates who have been on Fox News already and will be in the future, and the ones who are talking about it but haven't committed to it yet. The famed Vermont senator and the senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, have already been on Fox News and had town halls. Sanders drew a lot of ire from his base for the fact that he was willing to do so, but he held himself fairly well from what I saw of it, but he was not afraid to go on and talk to people who might not like him to begin with. It looks like Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Kirsten Gillibrand have been scheduled to be on the network, but have not been on yet. I believe Buttigieg will be on this coming Sunday. And Julian Castro, Beto O'Rourke, and Cory Booker are all talking about being on, and some of them already have talked about the process being in the works to put them on the network. Fox may not be a right-wing network, but they tout themselves as being such. And with that in mind, they do welcome on opposing views to a level that really lends itself to objective journalism, or at least what passes for objective journalism in today's polarized world. Left-wing radio host Leslie Marshall regularly appears on the channel. The channel just hired former DNC chair Donna Brazile, and one of the shows that actually launched the channel to prominence involved Sean Hannity, but it also involved far-left commentator Alan Colmes, God rest his soul. And to be fair, I don't recall MSNBC ever welcoming on anybody from the packed Republican field back in 2016. Nor do I remember them welcoming anybody on from the Republican side of the aisle during the 2018 midterms. CNN did a little bit more to accommodate this, but even they were lacking in their representation of the right-wing views. The idea of appearing on Fox News has drawn a lot of criticism from fans of the politicians that are over on the left. I remember when Bernie Sanders announced that he was going to accept Fox's offer to have him on for a town hall, and he faced some very sharp criticism from his fans. I actually engaged and argued with one of his fans over the idea that Bernie was going to be on the network. Now, when the people talk about criticizing their politicians for going on the network, the first thing that they say is that these politicians going on the network legitimizes the network, which the network is a legitimate network. The politicians don't have to legitimize it by going on it. Realistically, though, when you look at a town hall from one of the more mainstream networks like CNN or MSNBC, you quickly realize that the guests at the town hall and the questions that the guests ask are very carefully chosen in order to make sure that the politician that is talking on the town hall is not exposing the agenda, and somebody from a so-called opposing network might actually ask some hard questions. We saw a little bit of this when Bernie Sanders was on Fox News, and he was asked how we were to pay for some of the programs that he wants to implement. Sanders did not have a good response for this, and it showed. He tried to sidestep the question while he was on the network, but it was clear that he had no real plan to cover the costs of the programs that he wanted to implement in order to get votes. There was another point that was brought up consistently before Bernie Sanders went over onto Fox News and had his town hall. A lot of people were talking about the idea that Bernie Sanders or many other Democrat candidates could go over to Fox News and talk to many of the more centrist voters in the country and try to talk them back over into the left agenda. There are a lot of Democrats out there, lifelong Democrats, who decided to vote for Trump this time through because they couldn't get behind the progressive agenda. And part of that came from the fact that the progressives were not talking to them. They were only talking to college-age millennials. And the rebuttal that I continually saw when I saw these arguments brought up was from far-left progressives who believe that anybody who would dare vote for Trump is subhuman, should not be voting at all, and is completely out of play. They don't even want to try and reach out to any of those voters anymore. The voters are dead to the far-left progressives, and they only want to focus on the people who did not vote. While many more of the Democrat candidates are entertaining the idea of reaching across the aisle, Warren is not the only person over on the left who has refused an invitation from Fox News. Perez has expressly refused to allow Fox News to host any of the primary debates throughout the primary season for the 2020 election. And most people out there will probably think right out that Perez is afraid that the moderators from Fox News are going to ask hard questions about policy and try to get the Democrats to back up their policy. But we could even take this a step further and put the tin foil on, especially with what has been talked about when Clinton was running through the primaries in 2016. If we believe the conspiracy theories, we would look at the fact that Perez has refused to allow Fox News to host any of the debates, and we can look at it and say, is Perez refusing this because he knows that the moderators at Fox are not going to give their favorite candidate the questions in advance? But that's a question for how far you do want to go down into the conspiracy theories and how much you want to believe what some of the far-right commenters have talked about in the Clinton campaign. But it does lend credence to the idea that Elizabeth Warren possibly knows that she doesn't have the answers to some of the questions that she is going to be asked. Now, a refusal to acknowledge probably about half of the country by refusing to go on a right-leaning network may hurt the credibility of Elizabeth Warren in the mainstream, but it will definitely bolster some of her polling among the farther left and more progressives that follow her. And Elizabeth Warren is not a person to be taken lightly right now in the primaries. According to Real Clear Politics, most of the candidates have had a slight drop in their numbers, or they've completely flatlined at this point, but Warren seems to be enjoying a slow but steady uptick in her numbers. Additionally, I've listened to some of the podcasts over on the left, and I do feel that there's reason to believe that Warren is the favorite going into the 2020 election, and they are going to put safeguards into place to make sure that she does get the nomination without the superdelegates that they enjoyed in years past. And as far as Fox News goes, this series of invitations to left-wing politicians who are hopeful for president is a stark contrast from the media that's openly left-wing, both on the mainstream like MSNBC and in the alternative on programs like Pod Save America. You would never see anybody to the right of center appear on Pod Save America. I'm sure that Joe Biden is the furthest right person that would ever be invited on that show, if they would even have him at this point. But the right-wing media, we are begging for people from the left to come and talk to us, both in the mainstream like Fox News and on the alternative, people like me who have invited Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker to come on their shows. And Ben Shapiro has done the same, and Shapiro has even reached out and had Andrew Yang come on his Sunday special. If any of us were to go out and request to be on any of these left-leaning networks, the response that we would get would be absolutely fucking not. What do you think about the fact that Fox News has reached across the aisle and invited politicians like Elizabeth Warren to come on and do town halls? And what do you think about the politicians that refuse these invitations? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.